Welcome, everybody. Just two announcements. We've got the lawn games coming up at 5:30 right on this lawn outside here. So come on out and play. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe badminton or... Oh, okay. So don't bring your badminton rackets and birdies. And then we have another fun event this evening. We've got the Scholars Open Mic Night in this room at 9:30, and another Scholars Open Mic Night tomorrow night in here at 9:30. So come to both of those. And now it's my honor to welcome Wyatt Prunty.
Okay. Megan Roberts and Adam Latham work here all year round, and the staff is wonderful. They come in and work 18-hour days. Maybe they sometimes are up more than 18 hours. I'm not sure that involves work at the very end. But Megan and Adam have really put in the hours over the last 9 months to get this thing organized. That's why I'm still able to get up here now. And so we owe them a special thanks now and at the end. Alice McDermott is one of the finest people I know, but the other day in her reading, she had a half line, the profound and lyrical end of something. And I thought, uh-oh. But I'll try to avoid what that implies. I think Bob Hass did a very good job yesterday. His poems have a discursive element to them, and then they come around with more and more and more added in, and then they come back around, and they do have a profound and lyrical end, and it's more than just something. So that's a goal to look towards. This is a new poem entitled Making Frankenstein. The movie mentioned The Curse of Frankenstein did come out in 1957. He could not know, although he wheedled and cajoled, begged and promised, but they would not know, they would not take him to see The Curse of Frankenstein. Then his uncle called and offered, and they caved. So next it was the matinee, then home, and nothing said, until he sat through dinner like some little diplomat, and after that excused himself and took his plate and headed up to bed. Still nothing said, no, but midnight he woke screaming. Morning, his father cleared the plates, then turned. That's that, he summarized, too anatomical. What's anatomical? The boy asked back. This was summer 1957. Monarchs foraged flowers, working colors with their yes now, no now, light arrhythmias. By afternoon, leaves shimmered in the heat, and in the evening, intermittent waves of fireflies telegraphed their kind, while in the little deeps of darkened houses, window units swallowed oceans of air, until the boy, deep in his house, slept hard enough that when he woke, he couldn't close his hands. But what was anatomical, he asked again. His father climbed a ladder to the attic where he bumped around, then climbed back down carrying an old foxed Gray's Anatomy, packed full with illustrations. What, seeing these, the boy felt certain were the pictures of mixed meats. That night, the windows purred and nothing budged till breakfast brought another book, this time one on pathology, which meant more pictures, plus diseases where the worst were best and came from intimate contact. But what was intimate, he later pestered. till his father downed his drink and said, "That's how you made your way into this world." Mother rose and left the room. The boy sat silent. He sat there calmer than the noggin of a cat until he stretched and yawning, mentioned that he might just go on up and get to bed. But secretly, he understood. He knew for good and always that, in fact, his father wasn't a serious man, so he was on his own and had to make sense out of things himself, even if some sense went wrong, like Frankenstein's, who wasn't a serious man either, and that was really that, even if it meant you'd sink one day without so much as SOS. Some nights that summer, sleepless, eyes pinned wide, he'd slip outdoors to watch his parents on the porch. Their cigarettes, their quiet talk, and then, for nothing he could tell, their laughter as his father fixed another round of drinks, and after that, more laughter, like cicadas. The boy watched this as now he sometimes drives the 5 miles out of way to see that house again, and never you mind his knowing better. Sometimes just his doing this sets off imaginings that he's standing in the kitchen saying, "Oh, my dear animal family, how I loved you, how richly we purred." And sometimes, too, it sweeps back over him, his thinking that his father wasn't a serious man. Those times, slowing the car, he says to himself, "Well then, you're not a serious man either." This is called Small Facts. We have a lot of deer around here in our yard. The first one in late June and in tall grass, so from a distance looked as though some animal was down, a fox or dog, 2 in the open for good news. Then walking closer, what I found was just a fawn, mindlessly asleep, curled on itself and warming in the sun, the mother gone. First day a fawn survives without a scent for predators. So this one slept the safer with the mother yards away, watching from under low branches. And then last week there was another. And now this morning, twins, this time their mother cleaning them while I watched from the porch. This sort of thing occurs most every year, as though there runs a close but ragged lineage following itself season to season, or else it is a doe gives birth not to her fawn, but to a place revisited year after year. And there are other regions to my theory, the whys one wanders into when encountering a buck who snorts and runs, yet on another day, same place, a heavy doe will drop her head and paw. And there's the tall one who bumps the feeder with her nose, sticking out her impudent tongue for seed and staring through the window when the feeder's empty. Then the world of rutting also comes around, after which we have to rake and prop fences. Other months, the bagatelles through early vegetation as though we served a salad every year and only ought to add some vinegar. But today, watching one more dumb show of brief urgency and birth, the mother washing down her and bedding down her too, till they were near invisible among dead leaves, all was as unremarkable as ever. Indifferent, really, if still vulnerable. All just a little too routine, I said, to nothing near enough to hear. And then the mother wasn't there, so I could walk out for a closer look. And what I saw, spotted and wet and not about to move, stared back at me uncomprehendingly with eyes that had the clarity and vacancy of just cleaned windows or an emptied glass. It gazed out with a blank intensity that seemed impossible for anything that soon would hunger, leave and grow, survive and suffer, and possibly return. When you were out doing your lawn sports this evening, friends, I received a letter years ago, an angry letter from Anthony Hecht after the Writers Conference suggesting that I rent a crop duster and have the entire mountain fumigated. The letter was about ticks and fleas, so you were warned. This is a poem entitled Crescent Theater, Schenectady, New York. I got the idea for this poem a year and a half ago when John Gatta, who came here and joined our English department, and then in a weak moment let us persuade him to be dean of the college, told me about his grandfather who had immigrated to America and lived in Schenectady, New York, and played for the silent movies. And I didn't know what I was going to do with that, but it set off things in my noggin anyway. I guessed the Crescent Theater because it's the one that started first, I believe, and ran on maybe as long as any of the theaters that specialized in silent movies. Turns out this grandfather played for 3 different theaters, but the Crescent was one. Thomas Edison and a good bit of what he was about was there at that time, so it was a bustling city. So this is about a fellow who plays for silent movies. Thin silhouette below the screen. The best part was the way he nodded yes and kept up playing as the movie ran more or less in time with itself. That train converging on a washed-out bridge, or biplane spinning overhead, or Chaplin's cabin on the edge of so much gold, or nothing. Nothing said, only accompanied, as always, by some melody struck up between disaster this side, that side comedy, with everything alighting scene to scene. But now the camera's cranking so the landscape stutters while that biplane rights itself, and Harold Lloyd hangs from his minute hand, and Chaplin spins his cane and totters off. And then there is that bridge, which means that train rerunning in a flashback, therefore late for what's already happened next. Sparks rain out of reversing wheels. The worst must wait, letting the camera pan through distances, broad tinted fields and sky, the end, old names, to which that silhouette keeps nodding yes. Yes, through every last jittery frame, till house lights up and theater closing down, he walks home with one melody stuck in his head. It circles round, so more refrain than melody, some sympathy that captions can't explain. Whatever will, the New World street lights and its neighborhoods, there's always something else to fill a billboard or a sign, or just what's understood when home he reads his foreign papers news, listening to his children, using English for everything they wish, like rain that's falling somewhere else. But what do I know? I never attended a silent movie. Last winter, when we were having various political discussions about our economic woes, I sat down and wrote this in a sort of a bad mood. Checks and balances. Lion paced his cage, then stood and roared. till Monkey screamed and climbed a tree, as though by this the two agreed that Lion was carnivore and Terra on the other side was what Zoo paid him for. But Monkey had a trick he had learned. When smokers passed, he danced a fit with begging through the bars till one returned and handed him a cigarette, which he then puffed and studied as it burned, then flicked the butt just where the lion turned. Bad dog. He was a bad dog and he did not care. When nature called, he stood and lifted there. He chewed socks, rugs, and shoes, the rungs of chairs. Put on a leash, he locked his legs, would not budge. Asleep, he barked and chased what was not there. Awake, he barked and chased what was not there. When danger knocked, he shrugged. I see him still that way, facing the door, floppy and kind, wet nose against the glass, or scratching over ears where going bald, then sniffing round to find just where he lifted earlier, the which he did just once more when at last nature called, he followed. Why did I have to kill the dog? I'll change it. All right, let's see. Here's one about birds. It's in two parts, and it's entitled Two Views. Into the laterals and faults of strata, whose linear seams are like memory, water wades its way, settling matters in small aquifers, incised meanders, then floods over a landscape that teaches plains are only so much sediment, silt the slow ocean of any reach. Think travertine and serpentine mantle high in living rooms, or cames and tills scattered like loose change, the marvelous marble of dolomite and metamorphic rock, or granite now as coolingly aloof as someday overhead, small seismic self, feeling a gust rattle years through the roof. Meanwhile, there's still the phone and mail, the door, and the reassuring fact the fault's not yours as you've not budged. Not even the cat crosses the floor. Outside, the world's continuum of nests is full of cries announcing differences, while mine shaft down, the brittle shale of self waits certain of its own circumferences. One is colossus of one's growing doubt, with ideas like past presidents profiled in floating enthusiastic shouts from old elections, conclusions of the will, the dehydrations of mere permanence, but high wing overshadow how the world doubles in its transience. 2. Resplendently fragile, more color than weight, as agile of flight as I've changed habitat, the birds are choric in the fate of their varieties. Predictable of habit and Darwinian choices, myriad on one scale and on another essential, and of but one in all, and voices, this side liquid whistles followed by a trill, while there a series of clear carolings, then the rapid whinnies of descending will, while somewhere overhead a finch attempts all notes at once, as though to summarize the way limbs ladder up, step green to blue, so shadows rise. But year on year, wing beat and season, fattened or starved, silent or full of migratory sass, one reason brings each back, whether the same or no, warbler and thrush, sparrow and finch, wren, jay, thrasher, and dove, tanager, waxwing, owl, crow, hawk, they light, feed, breed, migrate, or stay, calendar-wise in their brief histories, and vulnerable as any immigrants searching to eat, they are geographies of days, convergences of now, and needed if for nothing more than their arrival, when worthy that again we crane to see, they bring survival. This is a Writers Conference, so this is a short little thing about poems. It's entitled The Poem. Gnarled avenues the years have mapped in mazed geometries, iterant gaps, while August heat has baked the lake beds dry, jigsaw and moonscape cratered in the eye. The little thief survives by going on through emptied states whose borders run a river valley scouring descent beneath the sundial pine's flecked monument to where light masses in the shrug of one low limb, and water speaks the rounded stone that says the river's syllabled by force, and all the down it drives repeats its source, which once the riffle, rift, or eddy stills, restores the clear pool's cold, suspended will. Let's see. I was telling somebody, I think Steve Yarb or somebody today, about my great-grandfather and his wife, his second wife, who was the younger sister of his first wife. Her name was Piranha Victoria Parks Wyatt. And she only wanted to have a little girl, and in that attempt wound up with 6 boys. My grandfather was one of the younger boys. Came up at a time when in grammar school you were taught Spencerian hand, which was a very, you've all seen it, it's a really beautiful script, promoted by a man named Platt Rogers Spencer. There's a little quotation here. Cursive script invented by Platt Rogers Spencer, who after 1848 energetically promoted it, but which fell from favor as the century wore on. My great-grandfather was in the Civil War and came back one of the very few survivors from the regiment that left out in West Tennessee, and was not a fan of the war. I'm not sure how he got into it, but he learned. And there was a letter he wrote home that was about 2 brothers, and they're mentioned in here. What else? That's about it. Oh, I had grandmother and 2 great aunts. One lived to 100, 197, and 194. And one lost her eyesight, but all of them, until close to the end anyway, were funny, and particularly my grandmother knew more about my life than I think I did sometimes. At least she acted as though that was the case and gave me plenty of advice. They were a funny threesome. They would correct each other. One would start a story. It was like the Fates or something. One would start a narrative. Another one would correct the beginning of the story, and then the third one would correct the second one who had corrected the first one. Then they would all agree that the third correction had settled matters and they knew where they were going, and then the first one would start the story again. The 3 in line and threading the house, talking ahead, so only sometimes heard behind, now take the stairs to what they call the plunder room. The grandmother and 2 great aunts climbing and talking, correcting till agreed, then finding somewhere else to disagree. They are rummaging the past as it was packed in a trunk thought to hold a book they have cajoled each other up the steps to find. All day they've argued over names with "don't you think" and "I'm not sure." So now they're settling the who, what, when of then. Two in their 80s, one 90-something, with no one older to pin her down on just what something means. One will lose her sight and spend her last year's baby talking a parakeet kept close to keep her calm. The other two will die stoically composed, dry-eyed, handing out advice, able to joke. But what has got them upstairs in the heat today, topping the landing of steep steps that scale their rambling 19th century house, is a book by boys going to war. Sonnets signed in 1861 and addressed to Miss Piranha Victoria Parks, a girl almost 16, so a child really. And now the oldest has the book and turns, opening the homemade binding to a maze of ink that is more threads than words. Poems scripted in the ornate style of children taught Spenserian and filled with all the lofty business of honor and goodbye. The dry heat of the top floor is as stifling as the false gallantry of these teenage boys, so ripe for death. And death is what they'll get, all but two. Those, the Pritchetts, gaunt brothers, each coming back an amputee, so later the locals will say of them, and the Pritchetts got but one hand between the two. Perhaps it is the sheer number of names that occupies these women taking turns reading to each other in the attic heat. That, or the awkwardness of what they read. Verse in a script more flourishing than legible, though earnest enough. Earnest out to the end of every overwritten line. Or two, maybe what holds is simply seeing the young this caught in all they cannot know. And 16-year-old Piranha Victoria, recipient of so many poems, who sent her daughters up so many steps for facts, she bore 6 children and aged into such portraits of frank, concentrated stare as now it is difficult to see her ever a girl excited by parties or laughing at boys more full of words than sense for what words meant. But of the poems opened now and read aloud, and should my fate in some late hour be, or I fall silent in that shadowed vale and honor lay my life before eternity, these humor and hurt with their expectancy. It is the Pritchetts have the first few pages, and then there are those following, boys signing all that is about to happen, when the quick-killed fared the best, as years later, and working at great pains, the one hand would struggle to make clear. "9/11. Everybody has a 9/11 poem. I had a neck operation and got 3 vertebrae from a cadaver. And 2 days, 3 days later, I was in pain, but 9/11 happened, and I never finished my painkillers. And very soon after that, I called Ann Borchardt and Georges Borchardt to see how they were doing. That is, maybe the following week, as soon as I felt like I could talk on the phone. And she told me about the ash, and I couldn't do anything with that then, but later I did. I took liberties. I put the Borchards, I made them dwellers around Gramercy Park. That's not where they live. They have a better address, really. what Anne said to me is, it seems the ash will find us every day. And the poem's called Gramercy Park. The days, they are days, slow adaptations, branches play by alternating spills of light and dark from a sun that oversees the park's high-leaf disturbances. Then minor stalls from which light shivers and falls in a gray drift with something new, a spidered lens of a view. So views, really, and all of this in miniature, settling its dry furniture. The sun has its surprises, but the days are only days, seen through the tint of an ash that is indifferent and covers us in showers with its tungsten-like opacity, matching our small vacuum tube capacity for light. The park is sediment and limbs and leaves its filaments coated in an industrial gray that finds us every day. Okay, back to animals. Stray. It's not me so much as my wife. She loves animals, and I can't cross her on this because I'm never absolutely certain that the reason our marriage has lasted 40 years is somehow related to her taking in stray animals. Stray. Only the very wise, this is a cat, a feral cat that we still have, who's a genius, but she's a serial killer too, but never mind that. Only the very wise know how to sleep in the sun, hunt in the dark, assume what's good, so with their claws they only purr for those who, driven by that sun each day and fearful of the following dark, barely consider dumb love's generous adoptions. And I don't know what page this one's on, but I'll find it. This is called The Insistent. Imagine being on a plateau like this, maybe looking down at a stretch of land lower, or maybe not quite this far, but anyway. Someone is opening tomorrow's show, pitched in the field below, while overhead the peaceful dead look on or not. Peace the same, as though receding light might shadow home away to search. All is memory, and names by which fixed memory still claims itself in charge. Oh, let that charge be low, here and tomorrow. Not memory of loss, but something of a gray-green spring, late children called home, answering. Let's see what else is here. Ad lib, I don't know. Some of these are about 7 days old. Maybe they're premature. Just told he had 6 months, he said, a fat old sedentary diabetic such as me. I could have caught a heart attack last Saturday and now 6 months get at it. Visits ended with his laughing at the finches circled round his feeder, groundling squirrels elbowing under, crows continually scolding. Something silent went on eyeing everything. The sun confirmed a different angle, then another. The trees collected in the shade they gave each other. And once, as we were leaving, he called after, I enjoy seeing you so much that sometimes I forget I'm dying. No, that's not it. What I mean is, sometimes there's some part of me stops dying. Well, let's see. We'll try this one. It's called West Than East, 1943. The origin of it really is some still pictures of a wedding during World War II, someone in our family. And all of the men were in uniform, and the couples, as was the case, I guess, with many of our parents, they were all going somewhere. Men were going to be deployed, or the families were going to move from the East Coast to the West and back and forth. And as somewhere near the idea of the problems with driving into the sunlight and so forth. But this describes a home movie from the 40s, 1943. This is early color, plus the speed is off. The parents are slow. They've done all this before. And now the wedding guests file through the door. Their hats are funny, but no one laughs. Then we are inside looking over rows of heads and backs agreed on what comes next. Some music, then some prayers, a quiet text explaining these, two people taking vows. How can the young keep doing this, vowing all they have no way of knowing? All the improbable happiness of driving when you cannot know just where you're going. In sickness and in health, but what is either till you're sick or lucky to be over it? What's better or worse before the lever lifts then drops and you are left with some new living or still looking? And even new may not be better. Even if more money may be baffling the way old walls extend new fissures. Taxes and worse, like expectations. Vows give no proof, and making them can lead to loss. But never mind the little bell and howl drones. Everything in front right now is still in focus. So of those gathered here today, this is about, well, maybe choice, even when it does get hurried out. Something that needed doing, like a force, expended freely, or a scene two actors play again so lines repeated have new meaning, if only that they start again. But now we're out. The light is full morning, and rice and flowers where to run away from those we guess are chorusing all of the old, almost self-mocking, tired cliches. But I remember how one bent to light a smoke, how he wore straw hats and carried a cane, and asked a question, always used a story to explain. How, wishing things better, he made a joke, and after breathed our laughter. As arms waving, too many waving soon, so many awkward cars ran, hurrying where the wisdom was, west by morning, east by afternoon. This is kind of a little hard poem, but I'll find something lighter to end with. Let's see, I have to find the right page. I'm going to be. Okay, it's entitled Memory. When I was 12 years old, I climbed into a tent beside a fire and listened while two men swapped stories from Korea. The first was eloquent about the Turks. At night, they sang around their fires, then suddenly went silent. Sunrise, the Chinese pickets, other side were dead. Men thought this happened once the singing stopped, but no, the campfires and the songs disguised approach up to each picket's back. The Turks, the first man said, had a wonderful ear. And the other man nodded and laughed, then prodded the coals. He had a stick for that, and worked it through the fire, back and forth, pausing every time it caught. The stick would light, he'd lift and watch, then let it go black out, working its tip back down into the fire. He did this as he talked about a truck at night, hit by a mortar shell so that it wrecked, steering column pinning the driver's chest, driver talking fast, truck catching fire. They used acetylene and had the steering column almost cut. And this was just a kid, maybe 20, that too, telling them, yes, he understood, and nodding when they said they'd get him out. Then there were flames, not much at first, then more, till everyone was backing from the light. I mean that man now working the stick, making it catch and watching it go out, then pushing it through the fire again, that man here and others there, then backing, watching. And what they see, I hear him say, is silhouette and pantomime, a dance around a wheel until a gun goes off, the young man sergeant walking back. But now the story isn't words. It is a screen that lights itself around a fire, climbing through low voices where no one rises from the wheel, in which each waits for who walks out and who walks back, and where the second man, clearing his throat, prods the fire, starts another story. Thin, declaring, this is another mortality poem, I'll let it go. Really, life is better than that, a lot better. Here, if this will work, here, a couple. This is another newborn. Rain, and it's, I don't know, it doesn't have a title. Rain from a low November sky that looks off zinc or old aluminum. Some steeped, corrosive gray that ruins within, so every second leads to something less. An afternoon of specificity that boredom counts, its rain-streaked windows framing trees turned filiform and waving in the blurred myopia of water over glass. Through this, a boy sits watching for the car the old man says he will not quit because he bought it just before the war and won. But now the hall clock thumps instead of ticks. Seconds damped the way an oar works in a lock, or how a boat bumps up against a tree, an old John boat, say, balancing itself, with being flat enough to go nowhere, so always there for what is next. You wade McNeely's river woods that way, the boy says to himself, still looking out. Then you find the blind beside the field, climb in and listen to the dark while nothing's moving. Only listen. And then the field grays up from underneath, and everywhere you look is stalks through standing water, pin-riddled steel. But now a car toy-like across the road, unhurrying and leaning where it turns, rattling the planked percussive bridge, then chewing gravel, then rocking to a stop, and the boy is down the steps and in the car before his mother finishes his name. We'll get those ducks, the old man says nothing more. Out to the side, one field is higher than the rest, cattle bunched around some hay. You need to go, the old man asks. Anywhere we stop's already wet. He laughs at that. The boy just shakes his head. Then they are on a metal bridge that takes them up and takes them down, over a river with a sign, but without banks. So everything looks just the same for miles. Take them on the rise, the old man says. That's mostly all he ever says. Just watch when they are coming down. You need to wait. Let them know you're there. They're having that complete your part. Then take them on the rise. But now the car is slowing, turning, speeding again, gravel arguing, and they are there. A low wood building with small windows painted green to make it like a greenhouse built for shade. Inside, slow ceiling fans, yellowed lights, and tables in long rows all piled with clothes, so little Piedmonts running wall to wall. All we need, the old man says to no one in particular, is help with getting sizes. And there are waiters, boots, coats, hats, duck calls, all manner of the best that one could seize. And someone somewhere talking on, then leading them along the rows, then he and others laughing at how short the long johns are, how small the boots. But there are socks, a red wool shirt, wool hat, and still the rain, covering stick-choked creeks and blind ravines, all hidden where the water wrinkles level down to level down. All this while overhead the boy imagines birds circling through bare trees, calling so they question down, flutter and slide to settle cloth-like on gray water. Take them on the rise, he thinks, but rise to where? Everything is here, as everyone is talking, story after story, and sometimes laughing, but only here. The old man's found a coat for him, and now some waiters worth another joke. But then they're at the counter checking out. The talk goes on, the rain goes on. Table to table, the fans continue, slow as the old car's lazy wipers, left and right, left and right. And conversation goes the same way too, till they have gathered up and someone wishes luck, then keeps on talking, laughing, until the boy, years after now, decides that yes, everything was about the way those stories ran, just couldn't prove, so always had to promise. And one last poem, and we will be out of here. And this is one I've read before, but I think it's a good one to read frequently. It's entitled Reading the Map. Has to do with being married a long time. Whatever bearing you select, eventually your path will intersect such variance and elevation you will find, I should back up and say, Brunton Pocket Transit Compass is something geographers, geologists, engineers use. It's a very fine compass. And just a little talk about some other things. I think some geological terms about strikes, dips, faults, contacts, and foliation. Those are all words that geologists use to describe rocks. Reading the map. Whatever bearing you select, eventually your path will intersect such variance in elevation you will find you need a topographic map for where things lead. Brunton Pocket Transit open. Orient yourself so compass rose, legend, and coordinates confirm the route you've picked. That done, pack up, set out, following the arguments of contour lines from rock and rise to water and decline, to where, in order to be accurate, cartography exaggerates. By scale, that bridge your map identifies should be invisible, but there it lies, as bold in print and pixel wide as the hurried river it divides, past which the landscape's slow relief devolves with roll and slip beneath every step you take, following a trail that, in order to be read, is inaccurate to scale. As map and compass make one motion out of strike, dip, fault, contact, and foliation, weaving and woven where roads and bridges or the duplicates of valleys, ridges, every aspect arguing some other, as love intends and maps assume, two put together, even when just one is represented. This road, that bridge, or you, could you be printed, clearly standing out of scale, yet there you are, ready for imagination's little car, driving a world that turns into whatever confirmations you pass through. A landscape written uppercase and in bold print, like love, and traced even where there is no pixel, even as reading the map, we know we are invisible. Thank you, guys.